What's up, Fracture Compass fans? We are here today at Zak Bagans Haunted Museum. We thought we would start the year off a little spooky.
Well, first of all, we're in Las Vegas. Fracture Compass went to Las Vegas specifically to go check out Zak Bagans, the Haunted Museum. You have to sign the waiver before you even step foot in the building, before you even buy your tickets. So, we already have our waiver signed. We are waiting for our turn to go in there. Fingers crossed, and wish us luck, guys. We can only film inside the lobby, so it's just going to be a few shots of, like, you know, what's in there. We're not allowed to film anything in the museum, but we can definitely give our thoughts afterwards. So, stay tuned. Alright, you guys, so, we got out of the Zak Bagans Haunted Museum experience. We decided, we did an outro in front of, right after, like, in front of the museum, and we decided that at first of all it was too loud because there was cars going by, and we just didn't have enough time to really process what we went through because it was an experience. So we decided to wait a couple days, be in our home, kind of reevaluate what we went through, and decide to give you guys a full in-depth review. So we're gonna go through each room and talk to you about what was in each room, what we felt about each room. But first, initial opinion was that it was a great time. I really liked it. I think it was well worth the $44. I felt that there was definitely some spookiness about it. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed seeing the Divot Box. I really enjoyed seeing the Peggy Doll, and we'll get into more of that later. But initial opinion is I would go through it again. I really liked it.
You would go through it again?
Yeah. Bree, would you?
I don't think I would go through it again.
But it affects you more.
It affected me a little more. And it wasn't so much the oddities, because I actually am like a really huge fan of oddities and stuff, and some of the rooms were actually really cool.
They were.
To look at and just to see all the things that he has collected over the years.
It's amazing.
But there were some rooms that I don't particularly enjoy. And we'll go over that.
We'll get into that, and we'll tell you exactly what rooms we're talking about. Yes. I went into every room and did every experience. Bree opted out to do a couple, so I can give you guys a more in-depth on the certain ones she didn't do. So, with that being said, it was $44 to do this per person. Before you even entered the building, you had to fill out a liability waiver. Essentially, can't sue them if something follows you. There was, you know, we took a picture of that, and I don't know if we're going to put it on the video.
Yeah, we will.
We will. So we'll show you guys exactly what you will be signing. We went into the lobby. You buy your tickets in the lobby. They do like a little pre-show, and it kind of sets the mood, and then we start the tour. And from this point on, there will be a spoiler alert, because we're going to be diving into some stuff that, you know, you will not know unless we tell you. So
if you don't want to know what's in the room and what you're going to experience, stop now.
Yeah. Right off the bat, I want to say that it's not the same tour guide. The tour guides are assigned to certain rooms, and you follow them, and then you get swept off to another tour guide who will do 3 more rooms, and then another tour guide. So these are all different people, different experiences, different personalities that we went through. I want to say that everyone did a great job. Mm-hmm. Everyone was very informative. They kind of said, like, you have to ask the questions or else you won't get the answer, because there's just so much so many things to see and look at. So if there's something that you guys are genuinely curious about, ask them, and they will tell you everything they need to know, but they're not going to just be like, oh, and that piece over there. They do talk about the really special pieces that they have, but they're not going to talk about everything.
And you know, there may be a couple things in one room, but then in most of the other rooms, my God, there's probably 30 things to almost 100 things in a room from top to bottom.
It's a good place to play I Spy, because there's just
with my little eye,
a dark shadow. Yeah. So, with that being said, in our first room was the oddities. Room number one. We went into this room that was full of oddities, and essentially it was kind of like it was almost to me like a little pre-show of, like, this is what you're going to be experiencing. You walk in there, and there are a lot of movie props. There were a lot of clowns, and they actually had a like a, you know, like one of those like fortune tellers that's like mechanical, and it was Zak Bagans, and you would put in $1, and
they asked for $1.
Yeah, they asked for $1. You put it in there, and then Zak Bagans would give you like a piece of advice for the day, like this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do during your tour, and then it would spit out a little card,
it's
and
like
gave you like some advice. It was very, it felt very like just fun.
Yeah, that was a fun.
I really liked that they made like fortune tellers like after Zak Bagans.
So, kind of a little spoiler though, is that they ask 2 people to go into a hidden room. They say The mansion looks at this house is 11,000 square feet.
Huge.
And it doesn't look like it from the outside, but once you get into it and you get really in depth into it, you realize you can very much get lost inside this place, and it's not a place you want to get lost in.
Yeah. We didn't even go through each room, too.
Yeah, there are 30 rooms that we were told. You'll only go through like 22 of them, and the cool thing is I think that things keep changing.
Yeah.
Throughout the museum.
There's always more new pieces coming in.
So you go to the room, and they're going to ask for 2 people to step inside one of the hidden rooms, because there's a lot of hidden rooms inside there. And 2 people, one person in our group particularly got chosen to go in it, and
you just hear,
she came out the most scared we've ever seen her in her entire life.
Yeah.
And then we have a little person that steps out, because there's a bunch of dolls in that room, and that little person was very small, and they came out. You give the dollar that they asked to the little person, she puts it in. Zach says his spiel to you, which is really cool. I actually really liked that machine, because they did a complete facial
it looked like
reconstruction of him. The little card comes out. Whoever gave the dollar gets that card as a memento of their time at the museum, and then you are swept off to the second room.
Okay, room number 2. So this was the gambling room, and I think Bree really liked this room. So
I liked the room. I'm very much into like the history of Vegas and a lot of the history of everything, but they had the roulette table that they used in the old gambling times, and you could tell there really came a point where that saying "the house always wins." And that's the truth. And when they flipped up the side of the roulette table, they had magnets that were connected to batteries. So
a little button that they would press.
And they would press the button in order to flip the ball into a certain slots.
But how that plays into the history of it all is that's what the gangs used to use back in the day.
Exactly.
And so I think that was kind of the theme of this room, was that it was like, gang related. And so the Wyatt Earp. Yeah.
And then they had Wyatt Earp's Bible, which, I mean, who doesn't like
that was crazy.
Wyatt Earp and
they had an open chair next to the Bible, and it was essentially like an invitation for his spirit to go ahead. It was like a welcome, like if he wants to come over, he can. And I thought that was really interesting, and that kind of segued into our third room, which was the
room number 3.
Oddfellow Church. And Wyatt Earp was actually part of the Oddfellow gang.
I did not know that.
I did not know that either.
Existed at all.
And so kind of explain the society. Well, gangs, cult, all that jazz.
I would say more society.
It felt cultish. To me, it kind of felt cultish. But that's up for interpretation by anyone. But essentially what they would do is, I don't know. So essentially the Oddfellow Society was that if you could not pay for your funeral arrangements, they would do it for you, but it came at a cost. And we're not going to really delve more into that, because you guys need to go there to learn about that. Yes. Some of the things we're going to be discussing is a little morbid too. And we're definitely going to the rabbit hole is going to get very dark here. So there's going to be some things that I'm just going to kind of leave out, because you guys should definitely check it out. And other things that I just don't feel like super getting into detail about. But that was a really interesting room. And I think not my favorite room, which is the one that's coming up, room number 4, just my favorite piece of collection that there was in room number 4. They had, what was his name?
Room number 4.
Lugos?
Bela Lugosi's
mirror, the guy who plays Dracula, his mirror in there, and it was a bunch of art. And one of the pieces of art was in the corner, and it was the Silent Hill portrait, and it's from the movie.
He loves Silent Hill.
Silent Hill is one of my favorite video game series, and my movies too. And I just thought that was so amazing that I was looking at a piece from the movie from Silent Hill that they restitched up, and it was a painting of a witch getting burnt, and it was the one that Rose uses. So I don't know. That was just a huge highlight for me. I was already like, this place is paid off for itself. But the real big draw in that room was the mirror.
Yes, was Bela Lugosi's mirror, and what people didn't know about Bela Lugosi was he was very much into the occult. He did scrying on that particular mirror.
I did not.
So people that have looked into the mirror, they basically say you don't know if somebody's looking back at you. And you can feel ill, you can faint. They've had people kind of go down.
And so that was one of the things that you could opt out to do, because they had a screen or like a blanket covering the mirror, and they said if you guys want to look into the mirror, you guys can. Bree opted out to. I decided to do it because I'm like, screw it. And Bree is affected more, I think, by things like this. We won't get super into it, but she definitely has a bigger connection, I think, to things otherworldly than I do. And so I feel like I was not as heavily as affected as she was. So when I looked into the mirror, granted, it was scary. It was really freaky, and it made me kind of feel like, but I didn't feel anything as I did on a couple other things. There was a couple other things in that museum that I was like, okay, crap, did I bring something home with me?
Room number 5. Room number 5 is the puppet room, all right? This room, walking into it, it seemed more of like an oddities room than anything.
Yeah, it wasn't scary.
It wasn't scary. The one thing that we will warn you about is there is a jump scare right in the beginning. It actually really got me because I'm already in this house by, you know, like with 12 other people, and you're already kind of on edge of what you're going to see, what you're going to see, what you're going to see. So when you walk into the room, a guy just, boom, bursts out of like this little cabinet and like starts talking to you, and he has a puppet mask head on. I feel it was much of an oddities room.
Yeah.
I think other people had other feelings of it, but you can see the puppets. It's okay, sweetheart. You can see the marionettes kind of moving by themselves, and he like goes on and on and on. He's very good at talking.
Yeah.
And explaining this room and kind of making it, you know, his voice fluctuate and everything. And you could see like the marionettes moving, and he had said like they move by themselves, but I really do think it was just mechanisms that were moving it, because I didn't feel like anything was really in this room. It's just playing off of your fears of marionettes and ventriloquist dolls that are staring at you and everything.
So we stepped into the office of Dr. Kevorkian in room number 6, and essentially it's a pre-show, and what Zak Bagans says is Dr. Kevorkian was a doctor who would take terminally ill patients into his van and offer them assisted suicide, but he wouldn't be the one to do it. He would actually not force the patients, but have them press the button to inject them or have a mask on with CO2, and so I think almost they were saying more than 150 people fell under him in terms of that. It's a very touchy subject, so I'm happy that when we went into the next room, which actually had the van that he did this with, it was kind of a memorial of all the victims, and it felt very peaceful in there. And I'm happy that they didn't do this gimmicky thing where they tried to do a jump scare or they tried to, like, you know, make it spooky. When you walked in there, there were candles lit, there were, you know, prayers and memorials of all the terminally ill patients that did the assisted suicide by him. And then they recreated, in the middle of the room was the van, and they had inside the van like a dummy with like some of the stuff that he would have done to them. One thing that I can take away from this was that it was you know, tasteful. It wasn't tasteless, and it was a memorial to them, and it was essentially death by dignity. And, you know, this was essentially like, this museum made you feel things for sure, and I think that this definitely affected me heavily because it was real. You know, and not saying that everything wasn't real, but they did say that, you know, a lot of this is like, you know, just fun little trinkets, and then some of this is real. And so especially in the next room, you saw some pretty crazy things, which brings me into room number 7, which was the murderbilia. And it was essentially, they recreated this prison, and you can hear the inmates speaking on the speakers, and they did a really good job at that. And it had Charles Manson stuff, John Wayne Gacy, the Secret Santa Claus Killer, Night Stalker, and actual props and pieces that, you know, John Wayne Gacy's paintings were in there. They had some fan art that was sent to the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, that was in there. But the one thing in that room that affected me the heaviest was the Santa Claus Killer, because they had a TV screen and it showed you the real life victims' bodies, and I was looking at dead bodies, and essentially it was, what he would do is he would just jam his victims in these barrels, and he would pose as a Santa Claus, and he would, like, you know, saw their elbows so he can like put them. And so when the police discovered them, they literally dumped out the barrels, and the bodies were not fully decomposed, but it was essentially like human pudding. And they had those images playing, and I was looking at it, and I didn't think that it was going to affect me as hard as it was, but then I realized, like, this was human life that I'm looking at, and look at them now. And so that's what I really want to, like, give you guys that warning, that it didn't take away from the experience, but it really affected me heavily. Can you hear it? Can you hear the fire alarm?
Is that up there?
Yeah. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I just wasn't ready to see that stuff, so I need to tell you guys right now that if you're going into this experience, enjoy it, but be ready because you're going to see some very graphic things, and it's real. You're going to see pictures of dead bodies. And there's another room that also affected me pretty heavily, what we're going to talk about, but you actually see this, and it's not like, you know, how it is in the movies, it's real, and so I just want you guys to be ready for that. It can be a very heavy experience. It's informative, it's fun, but there's some times where I'm like, this right here is gnarly stuff. And so
I think this is where I started to kind of zone out a little, because I don't like watching innocent life be taken, and these were people's family members, and these were actual monsters. You know, we deal with Halloween a lot here on this channel, and we deal with monsters and stuff, but to look at true monsters is a
affecting
whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and the museum did it in a good way where they, you know, it was informative, but it was like, it was perfect. It was the perfect amount of like, okay, what should we show, what shouldn't we show? And so I do appreciate that they, you know, they were tasteful, but you know, it's still graphic.
But it's still in your
And
face.
so that brings us into room number 8, which was actually my most favorite themed room, and it was Ed Gein's Cauldron Room. And essentially what Ed Gein was, he's the guy that inspired leather. He would use humans to make furniture and, you know, clothing. He would use their bones, he'd use their face. So he never rolled around with a chainsaw. So they had a real life cauldron that he used to essentially boil people, and, you know, the parts that he didn't need, he would, you know,
get rid of it.
Make a human stew out of it, essentially. We don't know if he would eat it or not. But they themed this room to look like the inside of the barn that he used to do all this stuff with. And they had lightning, and they had like people hanging from the rafters at the top, which was really, really well detailed. They had his real life shovel that he used, and it was hanging on the top there. And they pumped a smell in there that really reminded me of Halloween Horror Nights. It made me miss Halloween Horror Nights. I was like, oh, this is like the Texas Chainsaw
Yeah, it
house.
was a Texas Chainsaw. If you guys have walked through Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Smells
maze,
terrible.
it was the same smell.
And
it's a tanning smell.
That was just a neat thing that they really well themed it. It was his cauldron, and so I think that's all that was really needed to speak about that room, which brings us into room number 9.
So room number 9, you now go out of the Ed Gein room, and you're going to go into the hallway, and I'm having a cramp right now in my leg. Jesus. Okay. So you're going to go into the hallway. You basically go to where the basement area is. They talk about some of the satanic rituals that were supposedly in
Which we
the
weren't allowed to
house.
go into, by the way.
Right, so only Zak's allowed to go down in the basement, so you're just kind of at the top of it, and then you move in, you see a bunch of just oddities, things like that. They brought us into kind of a side room area, like a parlor area, and they had a doll that had just been brought to the museum, which is why I say, like, the museum will continue to change as people bring stuff in, because people are bringing in haunted objects that they don't want anymore in their possession. But there was blood splatter on the dress from a father.
So whoever came in contact with this dress would develop any illnesses, cancer, heart attacks.
Yeah.
So the people who own this doll said, Zak, take it. And that was actually a new piece that came in the night before, so it was very interesting.
It was the father's blood because the son stopped him from murdering the family, and the shotgun went off, and the blood splatter went on the daughter and the dress. So that is there if you want to see it. So we move through the hallway. You're going to see some voodoo items. You're going to see some memento mori. You're going to see some death masks. You're going to see actual shrunken heads. So I feel like this was more, again, you moved out of some serious, and they're kind of trying to bring it a little bit lighter, even though these are still dark, heavy subjects. It's not so much in your face like in the murderbilia room and stuff. And you're gonna go into the celebrity death room. If you know of some things, like they have Michael Jackson's chair that was beside his bed when he died. They have a Liberace's piano that is like known to be cursed, by the way.
They had Chris Farley's overdose picture.
They had Chris Farley's overdose.
Was, again, graphic.
Which you don't want to see it, don't look at it. It has sealed, I mean, I've never done drugs, I don't want to do drugs, and this just super glued that tight. of never doing a drug in my entire life.
It was a gnarly picture.
I had no idea that could happen. I thought you just would die of an overdose. Maybe,
no,
whatever.
it's a gnarly process.
No, it's a very, very harsh picture to look at.
It's gruesome.
It's very gruesome. And that actually stuck with me the most. That was an image that I could not get out of my head for a couple days. And so I, again, started to kind of zone out because I just not really into when you really think that these people actually died. I'm like, it's sad. They have Sharon Tate's wedding dress that was there. She went the night she was murdered by the Manson people. And you kind of go in through there. You see a couple more things. And from there, you're going to go into kind of room 11, which is the taxidermy hallway, which was... It wasn't that bad. It's just taxidermy of like weird
like
stuff.
Opened up like a secret passage.
And then boom, yeah.
And then that leads to the main dining hall, which was cool. And there was nothing to really know about that. It was well themed. There was a lot of candles lit, and it was just a cool dining hall. And it's important to note that there was an upstairs section in the dining hall that you can look down on, and we were up there after a couple rooms. So then straight from there, we went down a hallway and then into the mini carnival area, which was essentially just, it was like, like those Christmas towns or Halloween towns that you can see that are all like, it was like that. It was very expansive and well done. Yeah. And, it was very interesting. And then we went into another room where we had a live performer do some really interesting, freak show tricks, like nail in the nose and like eyelids hanging. Like he took like 2 hooks and put it like on a bucket of water and like swung it around.
Yeah.
It's important to note that if you guys go on Zak Bagans' Twitter, you can actually see a video of a guest who felt something touch his neck in that room, because they have cameras in each room to make sure you're behaving. And then you could see a light anomaly go past his neck as soon as he feels it touch. So that was a room that was, I saw that video before I went in there, so I was kind of like, oh, like I know what this one is. I didn't feel anything, but it was still important to know. And then after that,
the performer was really good.
Oh yeah, the performer
it's
he
a
was
lot
great.
of P.T. Barnum stuff in there.
Yeah.
If you guys watched, obviously we've all kind of watched The Greatest Showman. So, the dog boy's there. Like, it's not actually him. These are just mannequins, but.
And then you go up into another room upstairs at this point. You go upstairs, and then you're kind of going through, I would think of this as not so much a room. I mean, it's a room, but it's kind of like a little experience where it's this is the haunted attraction part of it, where they had a bunch of like fake clowns that would come up here. If you guys have ever seen like the Ellen show, she likes to use those fake clowns that'll like just lunge at you, and they had those everywhere from the ceiling, coming from the sides. And so this was kind of like the fun like jump scare part before we got into some really heavy shit.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of jump scares in that room, but I will tell you, those clown mannequins are about a foot away from your face.
Yeah, they were kind of freaky.
It's very, very tight, and their faces are not friendly. So if I did ask the girl, because I didn't go in a couple of the rooms, so I was talking to her about it. And if you do not want to go through that area, if you are just absolutely afraid of clowns, there is a way around it. You just need to tell them. It's a lot of clowns, and I'm not like 50. Okay, and they're full mannequin size, and they have demon faces. It's just weird.
So that brings us into the next 3 rooms, which affected me the most and deeply, and I feel like every room in the upstairs level was pretty gnarly. So let's start off with the first room that we went up to, which was number 15, I think, at this point. It was the Divot Box. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what the Divot Box is, you guys should. It's probably one of the most haunted objects in the world. A Jewish lady was in possession of this box. She survived the Holocaust, and she felt that there was a demon that was following her. So she decided to trap the demon inside this box and carved a Jewish prayer on the back of it. This box has traveled through many different people, and every person has had the same experience with it. They've had bad dreams, they've felt ill, they've either committed suicide or had issues. And so
some people have even opened the box and been found dead next to it. So this box is now in the possession of Zak, and so when you go into this room, it is surrounded by a glass case, so you cannot touch it. It is surrounded by a ring of salt and sage. And there are like a Jewish prayer next to it. And so before you go into this room, there's a pre-room. They call it like the Incubator Room. And you get given the choice. Do you want to enter this room? You may, or you cannot. And so when you go in there, I can already say that this room, it felt heavy. I
found the box to be kind of beautiful in a way. I did not want to touch it. I didn't really want to get anywhere near it, but it is always sealed. You may not touch the actual Divot boxes behind glass case, and there's a line of salt and sage around it. So it was definitely a very interesting experience. I'm happy I was able to see the Divot box. Would I probably ever dare to go in there again? No, it felt heavy in there, and mind you, we were kind of feeling a little dizzy and lethargic while we were in there. Now, granted, I had not had lunch yet, and so I have a feeling that was probably it, but because of a combination of that, I didn't want to push it and keep getting near it, so I stayed my distance. Then there was another tricky room, which is room number 16, which is the Peggy doll. And for those of you guys who don't know who the Peggy... Actually, you know what? I'm going to have Brie explain the Peggy doll because I've been doing too much talking.
Aww.
What's the... just bit me.
So, we're kind of watching our cat right now, and she's a little freaked out. Leave her alone.
You're mean.
Yeah.
Well, she's a sassy girl.
I don't know what's her problem right now.
I am cat. That's what she says.
Okay,
All right,
so we're going to try to get through this because there's some weird stuff going on with our animals.
Room number 16, Peggy the Doll.
Peggy the Doll.
Yeah.
If you guys don't want to see Peggy the Doll, you don't have to see Peggy the Doll. You are asked to step all the way over to the side. A lot of these rooms are very, very small, you guys. You are going to be packed in together, so you have to get close. And Peggy, once that door opens, she's right there. She has a ghost box going on inside, and you are to say hello to Peggy, and if you disrespect Peggy, that's at your own risk.
Essentially, too, is like, people who have looked inside Peggy's eyes, like have stared at her, have experienced, heart attacks, health problems. People have even bled from the eyes, they were reporting, and over 80 people were watching her online because they did a live stream and were reporting that they felt ill.
Yeah.
So I looked into Peggy's eyes. I'm not going to say that I felt comfortable. Nothing happened to me. I didn't feel any chest pains or any bloody nose or eyes or anything like that. However, it was like, knowing all that stuff, I was like, I feel uncomfortable. I don't think I'm going to look in your eyes anymore, and I left the room. I
did not go in the room for the grand fact that she has been known to cause heart issues, and I have a flutter in my, sometimes that goes on with me, and so I didn't even want to risk the fact. But I still decided to stand out in the hallway.
What did she say?
She told you guys to leave.
Yeah, when we were leaving, one of our members of our group said goodbye, and on the spirit box she said leave.
Yeah.
So that was like,
and I think
creepy.
I think to be known that some of us did have anointment on us. We had blessed each other before we had gone into this, and I don't think she was happy about that. Because we were all very protected.
So we're going to speak about this next room, and this was actually the room that affected me the most. And this was Robert Bordello, the Kansas City murderer. Now, this room really affected me, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to kind of give you guys a little backstory of who Robert Bordello was. He was kind of a weirdo who would essentially lure male prostitutes into his home and then torture them. But the way he tortured them were pretty brutal, and I'll get more into that, but he would document it. And so he would take bleach on Q-tips and rub their eyes with it. If they were screaming too much, he would actually inject bleach into their Adam's apple and their larynx throat area so they could stop screaming. He would rape them, assault them, and then he would even take needles and then clamp a car battery onto the needles and just turn it on for 5 minutes at a time and just watch them suffer. And a lot of them would die from either, they had bated breath and they just passed. The scariest thing about this whole situation, I know that sounds scary, was that he would document each one. And so on the walls, they had the actual photos that he took of these victims being shocked, being tortured, and that really affected me very hard. Because it was a rough thing to see. And then they also had the cot in the middle of the room that was behind glass that still had blood and poop stains from the murders. And so they had a dummy that kind of recreated what they would go through, but it was still so hard to see the pictures on the walls of these poor victims. And it's funny enough that one of our tour guides actually met Robert Bordello because he had like a little, he sold oddities at a flea market, and she spoke to him and said that he was really weird, and she was kind of confused because she, you know, she bought a skull like ashtray from him, and she doesn't know if it was real, like from a victim or not. But he, in interviews, Robert Bordello did say like, no, I've never used anything like that, but he's a serial killer, so how can we trust him? So that room really affected me. I think that room stayed in my head the longest. I actually went home and did a lot of research on it, and I felt like that was kind of the closure that I needed, because that one, it wasn't even haunted, it just affected me the most. So
it's hard. Again, you're looking at a true monster.
You're looking at real. It's real life.
And the fact of the matter is that you're looking at the innocent people being hurt by this person.
One picture that really affected me, and I don't know the victim's name, but I do know that he was being shocked, and he would actually take the car clamps and attach it to their testicles and then turn it on, and I don't know if that was the one that was happening, but he was being shocked, and like he was just like freaking out, and like I just felt like I need to leave this room. It sparked interest on like, okay, well, I didn't even know this killer existed, but it made me feel a little sick to my stomach.
Yeah, as it should, because you're not psychotic.
Oh, and it's also really important to note that between these rooms, there was a little scenario that Zak Bagans has a really terrible nightmare as a kid, and it was a bunch of mannequins essentially like tearing each other apart, and so he recreated that nightmare, and so we didn't spend a lot of time looking at this piece, but the mannequins did move, and it was like a little art gallery section. Good Easter egg. Check that out if you guys can.
I spent a little bit of time with this piece because I was waiting for people in the hallway.
When we were in the Peggy Doll room?
When you were in the Peggy Doll room.
Yeah.
And literally, I was like standing there with my arms folded, just kind of looking around, because it's dark in the whole house.
And he just like lunged,
and the thing just lunged out and looked over at me, and I was like, okay. But you know what? Like, I'm so used to like fake stuff, like with actuator. I can hear the actuator sound, so I'm so used to it. I just kind of like looked over and was like, oh, and the lady's like, oh yeah, that's Zak's nightmare. That he wanted to share with all of you.
Pretty good nightmare. So now we're moving on to room number 18, which was I was gonna say Marilyn Manson's
remains.
Charles Manson's remains.
Now you went from like heavy, like you're just you just feel like you're weighted down. You go down into these next rooms. It
was lighter.
And they're a little lighter, but you know, it's just Manson's remains. They have his ashes and his hospital gown that he died in. That's just something you look at really quick. It's nothing crazy in the room. They do have like a brain, a heart, and a severed hand that are in formaldehyde. And even though looking at that stuff, I was kind of like, meh, you know, because I'm like, I'm used to a science class and they have all that stuff. The severed hand,
that was like whatever.
Severed hand, but like I still was kind of like, oh, fascinating.
The brain was cool.
Yeah, and the brain was cool, and the heart, like it's nothing that I haven't seen before. Yeah. So.
Then we went into this one was actually kind of freaky. Was what was the investigator's name? I forgot the investigator's name, but she essentially was a paranormal investigator and a researcher, and she documented a case of a demon following her. And so you can see like they had in this little area, they had like a bunch of pictures of her like before this like demonic thing was following her, and it was like she was happy, excited, and then on the bottom side of these pictures, she documented a selfie of her and the progression of like her looking normal, and then her looking sleep deprived, and then her just looking skeletal, and then her like almost to the day before her death was pretty scary. And then they recreated the room on where they found her dead, and
with her, I think that was her actual equipment.
Yeah, and actually had her equipment in there, so that was really freaky. The next room was the lightest room of them all.
Yeah, we had the Natalie Wood room. If you guys don't know who Natalie Wood room, she was an actress, and basically her death is kind of still a mystery of what happened. She actually couldn't swim, and so people don't know if she got out onto like a little raft thing and then drowned or not, but there was a fight between her and her husband. Her husband smashed a bottle on the table, and then Natalie was found later the next day drowned off of a yacht.
But this was like a nice tribute to her.
Yeah, it was just a tribute.
It wasn't, you know, there was nothing scary about it.
Crazy. It was very light.
It was very light, and I think they kept it light because this was the final room that we went into.
Yeah.
And this was room number 21, which was the Demon House room. And if you guys have ever seen the Demon House, if you guys haven't seen it, sorry, it's on Amazon Prime. You guys can rent it too. And essentially, Zach did this investigation in this, like a world-class, like known demonically possessed like house. I can't speak today. I'm like stuttering.
Yeah.
And so you guys watch this documentary. Definitely do your research beforehand. They kept some items from this house, and I'm not going to fully spoil it for you, but when you go into this room, Zach does a little pre-show, and then they essentially say, like, would you like to leave? Would you not like to leave? And we all stayed.
We all stayed.
They essentially slid down this screen that was on the wall, and you can see these items. It felt very heavy. It was not the room that affected me the most, but because I watched this documentary, I kind of like, I had a more understanding of how this was kind of a big deal and how they were treating it like a big deal. Mm-hmm. And then we went to the gift shop where I got Zak Bagans Haunted Museum sweatshirt. It was only like $50. So, you know, leaving.
What? How much was it?
It was $50.
50?
50, not 15.
50?
50.
Good lord.
I know, but I like it. It's warm and it makes me happy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice.
So obviously, I was a fan of this experience. I would definitely go through it again. I feel like I would be better prepared now, knowing like, okay, you're gonna see some pretty gruesome deaths, and you're gonna see some pictures and some things that are real, but. I'm excited. I really love Zak Bagans, and I really love Ghost Adventures, and so this was an experience that I thought was very well done. Everyone was super enthusiastic. I think that it was something that I'm happy I did it. I would probably wait a couple more years before I go in it again, so that way if there's new stuff and I can see it, because it was something that was heavy. It was definitely a heavy experience. I don't feel like something followed me. I don't feel, you know, uncomfortable in that respect, but it is worth noting that when I was in there, like, I felt a little dizzy, and I just felt like, whoa.
I would not go through it again, but that is just my personal thing, and I'll tell you guys what happened a little later on in the day that my fellow people didn't even really know about. But do I think that if you are interested in these things, then absolutely yes. Do I think Zak Bagans did an amazing job putting together this collection that he's been collecting for a decade or more? Yes.
Yeah.
It is very well done. He has an amazing collection of items.
I loved it.
I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't do it again. I'm just not into that. But there's a lot of things that I have done, not even like haunted or whatever, that I do once, and I think that's just me. I do it once, and then I'm like, okay, what's next? Like, I just move on because there's thousands of more things to do in the world.
And you know, it also helped that we were in Vegas, so it was easy. Like, it wasn't like we were just driving home and had like all this time to think about it. Like we did, you know, we were doing other things, and so it kind of kept my mind off of a lot of it.
I'm glad we were in Vegas, because afterwards we like went out to play Top Golf, and we went and we did all this stuff and all the lights and stuff. So it wasn't something where you're just kind of dwelling on what just happened. But should I talk about?
You can say what happened to you, and then you can say like the things that I went through. Because you and I think, we're the most sensitive people in the group.
So I am a little sensitive, but I think the main reason why I probably wouldn't do it is, again, because later on that night, and granted, I didn't even go in some of the rooms, and there was a reason why I didn't, and I pretty much try to debunk everything. But I haven't had heart palpitations in a very, very long time. That night I started to, just out of the blue. I had a cheeseburger and I was really happy, and then boom, like they just started. I also blew my nose, and my nose started to bleed. It could that have been the dry air? It could have been, I don't know, but we were trying to kind of think of what was going on. I felt my chest being kind of compressed at that point, so we ended up going back to the hotel room. I laid down and we did a bunch of sage. We did some holy water and some blessing, and I literally just felt something release off of me. And I think that's why I'm very, very, very careful about what I go into and what I do, because I feel like I am a target. And then something that we noticed when we came out of the museum is that Jackie was wearing a St. Michael medallion around her neck for protection, and she kept saying it felt like something was just trying to tug it off of her. It felt very, very heavy. And when we got out of the museum, sure enough, there were red marks from the chain all the way around her neck, and we will show you a picture of that we showed.
Right. No.
You're gonna feel stuff, and I think a lot of the group just felt like they were walking on a dock, just very unstable ground. And this isn't to deter you from going. We're just trying to let you know that there are some people that you're going to feel things inside of a room, but nothing's really going to happen to you like Mike. And then there's people that are more of a target for spiritual energy. And that is just at your own risk. And that is why I'm pretty sure they have you sign a waiver.
So, I mean, I would definitely say if there's something that you guys feel like you could handle, go do it and experience it. But if you feel like you're too in tune with, like, you know, the spiritual world, then probably don't. But, we're happy to do this review for you guys, and we're happy to share your thoughts, and we hope you like this video. Yeah. So, you know, hit that subscribe button, make a like, send us a comment on what you guys thought was maybe the most interesting room. We tried to number them all for you, and what room you would probably think would affect you or you would like to experience. And
let us know if you have been to the museum and that you've had an experience yourself.
Yeah.
So we'd love to read that.
All right, you guys, so that is Fracture Compass. Bring it to you from Vegas. We're gonna go into more tourist things right now, obviously. Ooh. Ooh. So with that being said, you guys, thank you for watching this video, and always be ready, because you never know where your compass will take you.